Ta-da-da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. In the meantime, hi. I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And oh my goodness, I had a little competition with myself. It was kind of rushed today, and making dinner and in my timings, I guess I didn't get it quite right. And I prepared some meatloafs and some burger patties and I froze them. I ended up putting a meatloaf in the oven when it was frozen solid and put some potatoes on. And I thought I timed it properly, but when I cut into it, I could see it was just totally pink. This is my week full of disasters, right? Well, not necessarily big disasters, but little trip ups and some of my favorite things breaking and dealing with official stuff like the leases and stuff come in. And it's just that little pile up of mishaps. Yesterday, when I did my live, and I'm yapping away to myself for like 15 minutes, said goodbye to everybody, and I came in and, right, I played around with my mouse here and I pulled on a cord and it killed my live show, but I didn't know until I went in to do my thumbnail and to watch the live for myself because I come in and I take these lessons for myself. Sometimes I come in and I'm so right. I had a little competition with myself to try and get these little things. I even managed to make myself a cup of coffee, get a grocery list put together, do some dishes. I managed to get my meal. I ate late, but I got it in before my cutoff time of 8 p.m. It's not a diet, but it's a way a little bit to be more regulatory in how I eat. And it's just a matter of being proud that at least I try. And when I try new things, sometimes I hit something pretty good. I don't know. I'm not counting my chickens too soon, but cutting off eating at 8 p.m. has brought me back to that weight where I said I'm not allowed to go past that point. I went past that point. So I've been just hacking away at losing some weight. I got myself down to that point and I went on my camping trip, and right off the diet and not watching how I eat and coming home and not being as physically active as I usually am. I've been just driving in the lessons. I just feel that, I'm getting to the finish line or something. And it's now at that point of the quantity. And it's okay to do it at the end in that quantity because I'm all over the place. To do the quantity, it's because you understand it better, right? It absorbs faster and easier, and you have little tricks and get the information in now, and you don't understand it in the moment, but take the lessons and then you can always come back to it later, right? Instead of second guessing myself and popping in for a couple of minutes and different conversations and just not being able to absorb anything. Okay, Cindy, bring it back to the main branch of the tree. That little competition with yourself is over. You got your cup of tea. I know it's too hot to have a sip, but I'm going to have a sip anyway. A little sip just so I don't burn my tongue. Eugene, hello, dear. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I so much appreciate it. And I so much that you give me that thumbs up there. I appreciate it. Right? Okay, you guys. So today we were talking about, well, just the past few minutes, about those mishaps that trip us up, and we can beat ourselves up for it, and we can stress ourselves out thinking, oh my goodness, we got to get this repaired. How do we do this? And we can put ourselves in those frenzies, right? Those frenzies that sometimes put us in a position because it's just too much, right? And I'm not just talking little things. Sometimes those hits and those waves that we get, they're big things. Those are sometimes big kicks when you're already on the ground, and somehow we have to find a way to get up, right? To start again. I am grateful that my mishaps are resolvable, non-cost, right? It's not going to cost me a lot of money. And it's the effort that I put into it, right? And in the end, you really can't cry over spilt milk, can you? Because you're just going to make yourself miserable. And you know, when you're miserable, right, you rub everybody, right? You want the company in that. We are silly as humans. We are silly in that, but it's in that practice of being able to manage things on your own, resolve those small issues and hiccups and technical problems that I've been having, and practicing, right? All those tools that you pick up along the way. And then you think, oh my goodness, that's why I put that on the shelf. Why I actually took that lesson when I really didn't understand what it was trying to get across. It was trying to get across this exact thing. Can't cry over spilled milk. You got to ride those waves. You got to adapt and conquer, and you do what you have to do in order to make a little bit of movement for yourself in the direction that you want to be going in. And for lots of people, there's no direction at all. Sometimes it's in how we get along in our own environment. Sometimes we're just looking for company. Sometimes we're just looking for kindness. Sometimes we're looking for consideration or respect, right? And it's about being able to, it's not practicing the skills, but putting ourselves in other people's shoes and thinking, if that was me, right, how would I like the other person to come at it, right? And you try to give that if it's no skin off your back. And sometimes in kindnesses, right, a little bit of skin doesn't hurt every once in a while also. And that's the truth. And sometimes it blows up in your face. You do that kindness, or you've forgiven that somebody, and or you've loaned out a whole bunch of money, and it kind of backfires on you, and you beat yourself up. I'm so stupid, I got sucked into that again, never going to do that again. And again, you make yourself so miserable, you bring everybody else down with you. But if you just thought for a moment, right, put yourself in that other person's shoes, right, they still feel guilt and shame, and it's not like they don't know that they've let you down. And sometimes it's in how you handle it, right? Sometimes it's in understandings that sometimes people do mean well, even though they don't do well. You know what I mean? Like, but that shows well on us, doesn't it? That we know it. We know that they're going to take that $20 and go to the liquor store and get a case of beer, right? We know they're going to go take that $20 and go to the hotel and put it in the slot machines, right? But sometimes in those kindnesses, in consideration of where somebody is looking to get a little bit of solace, right? That's why I never, if somebody were to ask me for change or something, when I'm walking by them, you know, lots of times, well, follow to the store with me. I'll buy you a loaf of bread or I'll buy you some sandwich meat or something. And, that really they're just collecting those pennies so they can get that case of beer and stuff. I don't judge in that because I understand that everybody has handicaps, right? And sometimes those handicaps are physical, mental, emotional, right? But it's how we use, right, to comfort ourselves, right? Those coping mechanisms that we have. So I never judge anybody in what they use the few pennies that I hand over, right? Again, it's that idea, you can't control somebody else's actions, and it's not like they don't understand that they're doing that, they don't feel bad, that they, even if they shouldn't feel guilt or shame, that they're feeling guilt and shame anyway, just because they really are good people with problems, right? And we all have problems, and yet, the person standing next to him in a suit has also got problems, but you know we judge the person in the tattered clothes, right, and the dirty hands, rather than the person in the suit and the clean hands and the manicured nails, right? And again, it's just that idea of putting ourselves in other people's shoes, and sometimes it just means having a conversation and getting to know somebody, right? People do love to talk. Lots of times, I get into conversations and I get to vicariously live through other people's experiences. It's something I've done my entire life to try and figure out and how to resolve some of the issues that I had. And in being that experimenter in my own life, I thought maybe I would hit on to something and then all my problems would be solved and the world would be my oyster, right? And, a few lessons on the belt, and you come to understand that that's just masking, right? And it's been taking me a long time, and it is taking me a long time to really get down to the root of who possibly I might be or might have been, and see if maybe I could chase my tail a little bit to see if I can, right, challenge myself like I did tonight in the 20 minutes that I had before I knew I was going to go live. And I'm in the shower and I'm enjoying my shower so much. And in my brain, I'm going, oh, Cindy, right? 10 minutes. Right? Right. But that would have made me 10 minutes live, late for my live. And here I am being coaxed by myself. Oh, 10 minutes, Cindy. Nobody will even notice if you're 10 minutes late. Right? But I made it. I got it in here. And I had enough time to make sure that I had done the very best that I could to resolve the technical issues that I had. I've had technical issues. I had two fans blow up on me this week. I lost another one yesterday, and my big upright one, it went last week. The one that went yesterday has not been turned off. Well, only for cleaning. For 2 years, I've had that thing going. Right? I was very surprised. I was actually thinking, oh, it's such a great fan. It lasted so much better than this brand new one I bought. Right? And I was just really surprised both of them went. Now I've got this little USB clip on fan, right? Uh, Sitting there because I need something. Last night it took me about, oh my goodness, it must have taken me a good half an hour to fall asleep last night. I know for some people that's nothing. Some people have very hard time falling asleep, but for me, usually I just put my head down, close my eyes, and I'm out, right? But last night I didn't have my fan, and I'm so used to that air blowing in my face and the word, the engine in the fan, that it took me a good half an hour. And I thought, well, Cindy, you got to practice without a fan because you're not going to go out and spend $50 at Christmas time on a fan. So live with it. Open up the window, which is what I did. It was minus 20 Celsius yesterday, right? I opened up the window. Put my socks, winter socks on my feet, and I was cozy. And once I was asleep, I was fine. But I'm only telling you this because it's what I do now, in that um hypervigilance, in paying attention to everything. So when I'm sleeping, if I'm in bed, I don't want to hear, you know, the sink dripping. I don't want to hear somebody walking upstairs, or banging on in the hallway, or talking in the hallway, right? I don't want to hear the murderers and rapers, and because that's what will keep me up and keep me awake in that hypervigilance. And it's why I use the fan, and it's been so very helpful. And because I'm so mad for nature, mother nature, that fan blowing in my face gives me that feeling of being in the outdoors. So it's also another comforting feeling that I have, right? I don't know where that came from, but I'll come in later. Watch my live and see where I was going with that. We were talking about masking, right? I did a lot of that, very young. I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, but it was something that I did in order to adjust in settling into a new school. If you don't know, I went to lots of elementary schools. My dad was a nomad. We moved once or twice a year, all growing up. Grateful that by the time I was 16 years old, he was done with that. So my last couple of years in high school, I was able to go to the same high school. So that was super helpful because I was actually able to start my journey in learning to enjoy company of others, feeling safe in the company of others, because I never felt that way. In my hypervigilance, I was always seeing what was out to get me, right? I was always searching out that intent. And right, and people recognize that when they can see in your face that you see the intent. And I can't help it, right? It's in my nature, in my hypervigilance, that I do that. But it's been very helpful for me, and I think I've gotten myself out of some very sticky situations. I've been able to choose good friends, right? It hasn't kept the blinders off of me completely, right? I have been sucked in, but again, it's in that kindness, right, that we get sucked in again. And I don't think that's a bad trait. It could be detrimental, right? Right? Not everybody means you well, but sometimes they'll take that kindness that you did for them into consideration, and right, just say, get out of here if I see you again. Right? And I always found that uh, finding solutions in non-aggressive ways was always the best way to go, because once that yelling and screaming and threatening, right, that's what will get my system all worked up that way. And it's usually, that's the only thing. But how often does that come into our lives, where that's that intent to do somebody harm, right? And so it just kind of makes it so I feel a little bit safer in my environment. I practiced last night for a half an hour, but like I said, I got up today. I threw out the old one. I had to disattach it from the ceiling because I hang it from the ceiling so it just blows right into my face, right? And I put the little USB one. Oh, yay. I might as well have used a paper fan, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for anything. And it does have a little motor. It's not very loud, but it's a little buzz. We'll see. It's better probably than nothing, right? And then me and my sister go thrifting. I'm sure there's lots of fans going on now that we're at minus 20 Celsius. We're in the winter. Eugene, what's the temperature where you are? I know lots of places in North America where the weather is really nice. I'm from British Columbia. We didn't see a lot of snow in BC, up in the mountains for sure. But on the ground, we would be lucky if every 4 or 5 years it might snow on Christmas morning, but by lunchtime it would be melted. Now, when it comes to rain, oh my goodness, right? They always says, "Oh, why didn't you go to Winnipeg? It's so cold." But it's dry. It's dry cold. You can put clothes on and stay nice and comfy in your clothes. But if in wintertime you go out in Vancouver and it's raining on you, well, yeah, it might only be 5 Celsius. It's a whole lot warmer than minus 40. But you're soaking wet, and that wetness is going right to the bone. It was one of the reasons why my dad brought the family to Manitoba. It was because of the dry cold, because it was suggested to my mother for her arthritis that it might be a good idea if we were looking for a place to live that might be a little bit better. Hello, Earl. How's your night going? I was just talking about masking and how I would right adjust my personality and my offerings as a even as a small kid when I trade schools, because my dad was such a nomad. We always went to at least or one or two different schools throughout my school years, right? But every time I moved into a new school, right? I figure out and I contemplate and I think of all the things that I didn't get right in the last school, and I would readjust, right? I couldn't readjust my weight, right? Because I was an obese child. I don't like to say that because when I look at pictures of myself at that age, I would say I was probably built heavy, but I wasn't obese, not in the very least. But if you ask me how I mentally and emotionally felt about myself, oh my goodness, you would have thought that I was, what was that show? It was a cartoon. Um oh, I can't remember what it was. Fat Albert. Remember that show, Fat Albert? And it was right in that era that I grew up in too. It was a show that I really enjoyed because obviously I related to him, but I was nowheres near being obese. And yet, that's what was projected on me, not just by myself. That's not just the way I saw myself, but other people did too, right? But I didn't get it. I believed everything that came out of people's mouths. And it's really funny, especially when I feel out people so much now that I'm so hyper vigilant that I actually can pick up intent just like that. But I think probably it was in school that I learned to pick that up. But at the same things, blinders were on about things that, right, I should have known, and yet I didn't. It's really funny, you guys, and it's not just me. I see that absolutely everywheres, right? I don't delve into people's business that way. I really try not to. But sometimes, you are curious, and in your hypervigilance and your need to feel safe and be safe, right? Sometimes we have to be that Sherlock Holmes. Okay, you guys. That's that. Let's just go into the cards if you've never hung out with me before. Um, Oh, you've been working on cars. Oh my goodness. And laundry. Oh my goodness. I just showered. I got ready. I'm just ready to call it a night and think I'll just watch something online and then I'm just going to call it a day. Whether it was productive or not, I think slightly, but I don't think I was meant to overly exert myself today. I had all that exertion yesterday and I didn't make any plans for today. So whatever I did today, it was gravy, it was sprinkles, right? It was cotton candy. It was just a little bit of extra. So I'm just going to enjoy uh an hour or so before I call it a night. We'll see. I'll let you guys know. Oh, it's Friday, you guys. I'll let you guys know Monday if my little dinky USB fan did the trick, right? I do love my sleepies. I really do. But if there's a bang or a knock or a ding or some kind of unformed noise, right? Or those fire trucks going by, oh. Oh, well, we'll deal with it as we need to deal with it, right? Okay, you guys, let's just get in, grab a card, into it for a couple of minutes. They're just powerful words, everybody. This is the word tonight. Oh, is this ever amazing? I love this. We got the word compassion, you guys. I'm not bringing it up to the camera because it's not super clear like my other camera is. I may switch cameras on Monday to see if it's any better. It's in that experimentation, but I like, even for myself, when I hold it up, I like to read from what I'm seeing on the screen, right? But it says compassion is where your heart takes you to give, right? In that kindness. And you guys have heard me talk about the little drummer girl. Lots of people are struggling, right? And not just struggling for a short time, but it's struggling now for years, playing catch up for years, or even found that their whole life has been turned around because, again, change. And in the past few years, we have, as a whole, as a community, we have gone through a lot of change. And in that, lots of people took that opportunity to go down a different road, to call it quits in what they were doing, or they didn't get to make that choice. That choice was made for them, whether it was by an employer or a resident, or, because there's always something going on that's waiting just for us to mess up so they could throw a wrench in there, and then we're dealing with something really bad, right? And we got to take into consideration that, when we're doing okay, right? When we're doing okay, it's like, can we contribute a can of peas at a hockey game, or you donate food to charities, or like what me and my sister do, we hand off bags of clothes, and I'm constantly getting rid of things because I have so much. And yes, we get a little coupon for 20% off, but right, it's only 20% off. And it is a bit of a hassle to store the stuff from where we're going out and stuff, but it all helps in that little way. lots of times we say, I got nothing to give. It's been so tough. I don't have anything, right? And even for myself, I've gotten into the habit of not keeping change because I can't help myself when it's that guilt and shame. That's my steering wheel. I feel so bad when I have to say no to somebody who's asking for change. And so I purposely, right, make sure everything just stays on the account and I just use my bank card for everything, right? And it's difficult. I would love to be that philanthropist. In fact, it was a dream of mine ever since I was a little kid and learned what a philanthropist was. It was something I always wanted to be. But I also understood that being a philanthropist was a prerogative and a privilege of the rich, right? So, of course, that meant if I was going to be a philanthropist, I would have to be rich. But that never happened for me. There were moments that I could have contributed, right? And I contributed to my community of my friends and my family. But, to the Red Cross, to Heart and Stroke Foundation, you know, there are so many great organizations out there that have helped me out, even, where I've been able to not work and still be able to manage with my small pension to keep a roof over my head, right? Or keep groceries in the cupboard, right? Or get discounted bus service. And I got a swim pass. I go swimming for free, right? And these are the considerations that we give sometimes to the low incomes. And I am considered low income and I take advantage of these services quite often, right? In order to, well, stay in my studies, to make my life more stable because I found that, doing it all was putting me in a position where I wasn't getting anything done. And a lot of it was the realizations and the lessons that, you know, made me realize that, my workplaces were a big part of the problem, right? Not necessarily the companies and the workplaces themselves, but those dynamic relationships when you don't get to choose who you get to work with, who you get to hang with. But sometimes you just, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? And you let it pull you, right? Because you understand how you would feel if you were in that position. And if it pulls you to do a kindness, right? How do you say, I can't afford it? I can't do that. You have to go to the mentality of the little drummer boy. And that's what I do. Little drummer boy didn't have anything but his drums. And he managed a way to serve. He found a way to give, right, to little baby Jesus by playing a tune on his drums, right? We are all talented in some ways, whether it's by our voice, sometimes it is in the insights that we have, in the experiences that we have. Sometimes it's just in those kindnesses, right? Maybe baby Jesus, right? I didn't have anything for baby Jesus, but, right, maybe Joseph and Mary could have used a jug of water from the well and they couldn't get away from the manager. Maybe I could manage that. What was the skin off my back doing that, right? We find ways to help out and to serve, right? Compassion is where your heart takes you to give. I have a list. I really do have a list of places and individuals that I would love to give back, right? If I had the opportunity. One of them was to restore Carnegie libraries, right? To be able to give money to these heritage buildings so that they can still serve in some capacity moving forward. And we know libraries, our libraries here in Winnipeg, they're thriving. You would think probably they would be struggling in the fact that we are in the age of AI learning, and like books are just not sensible when all that information is at our disposal online. But libraries are allowing themselves to be pulled into the age of AI learning, and they are finding ways to innovate and find ways to be relevant in a world that could probably care less if they disappeared. And wouldn't that be a sad thing if the libraries disappeared? Right? I think it would be. But if I was a philanthropist, that's one thing I would want to do. I would like to have set up some kind of fund so that the libraries, the Carnegie libraries, and there's a lot of them. I think in North America there's like 300 Carnegie libraries, and they say there's about, get to your destination and be a false alarm. I live behind a fire station. Um, they say that only 20% of them are still being used as libraries, right? And they Carnegie just didn't fund libraries. He funded lots of types of buildings, but his favorite was libraries because he was a big believer in education, and education for anybody who wanted to delve into it at all. That was his compassion. That's where he was compelled. That's where his heart took him to give, right? And, he wasn't a little drummer boy. He had a few dollars in his pocket. But I bet you if he didn't have any of those dollars, he would have managed to come up with some other idea that made it so that he was giving back, right? I'm a true believer you get what you give in this world. And I think sometimes, that we don't practice that enough because we think we don't have anything to give, right? Call it equity, right? Without a return, right? Meaning no expectations of anything in return. Equity is usually what you put into a house when you don't have a down payment, right? You do all the fixing ups and you count that as your damage deposit. But yeah, if you kind of look at it like sweat equity, but without a return. Yeah. Compassion is where your heart takes you to give. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. I will be back on Sunday night. If you guys want to come and hang out with me on Sunday night, I have a great crew over there. They chat more than I do. If I don't see you Sunday night, maybe we'll see you Monday. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend.